Alright everyone, Lego here with another small shadow project. This is my 20th shadow project by my count, so that's a lot, but they're easy to make. I like making them a lot, and I always feel like I find them interesting, and it's always a challenge to find the right silhouette for the right project. This is a bit of a different one because I took it, as you can see, the pixels here. I took this with my phone uh, at my TV screen because there's no screenshot function on the PS3 as far as I know. So this is a rough one, but I really couldn't rely on anyone else to get me the exact pose that I needed or wanted for this. So I booted up the PlayStation, found the right position, and then just took a few pictures with my phone, which is certainly the last time I'm doing this, I think, in hindsight, because I thought it would be rather more easy than this, but turns out no, it really is pretty difficult to work with this. There's not a lot of resolution to really get a good anything. So, I mean, the vast majority of this project, which I thought would be less than an hour, because there's just 4 words, the vast majority of this was spent trying to clean this up, get the effects that I wanted, work around the fact that it was pixelated rather than whatever this is. So I needed to get the pose myself. I couldn't rely on anything on the internet, but by God, it was not easy to work with after the fact. So I might not actually do this again. However, we now have a silhouette. I'm doing the hair freehand style, as I'm very fond of by now. I put the ice pick in the picture from another previous project, so I didn't trace that again. I already had a good model from previous projects. I'm just reusing that. Getting the different parts of her body just right was a concern for me, primarily because of color work later on. I'm not sure to which degree I'm going to do two color coding at this stage, or I'm just going to do its total silhouette black. But I wanted to split apart certain parts of her body just in case I wanted to do a two-tone. So that's what I'm going to focus a lot on for the majority of this project, actually. If I was content with just the black one, this would have been over in like 30 minutes tops. But I decided to try and do some stuff with the details, the various equipment she has on her at this point in time, which is just a belt with a radio and her pistol holster. And I spent way too long trying to get those details of her body in as original a state as I could. I failed utterly. Partially, I suspect because of the low quality of the image, there was too much noise. So I ended up, after a lot of debate and a lot of fiddling back and forth, trying to clean various bits up, trying to see what I can salvage and what I can actually use and not. After a lot of time, I just ended up doing the hand trace on those parts myself. And that's really not the quality I've come to expect from myself. And I know that sounds maybe rather curious, but my standards for what makes a good two-tone has gone up drastically since I started doing these over 2 years ago. And at this stage, I'm just not happy with random splotches of things. I'd like my two tones to actually look like something. And I am fully aware that this is just me being very spoiled at this point by how many good pictures I've used, chosen deliberately to do two tones with in the past. But at this stage, it just felt like I had to. So I needed the tank top definition to come through. That was rather important to me because that establishes which character this actually is and which part of the timeline we're at. We are at Yamatai, we're not in the end of the sequels. She has a tank top. And I also spent rather a lot of time trying to fix the left leg. Here we see me giving up and then making a rough estimate of the belt. Just the outline, mind you. And a rather rough, very rough sketch of the pistol profile and an even rougher one of the radio. That is basically guesswork at this point because I can't really see any definite silhouette characteristics of any of this. So I'm going to obscure this a little bit later with some really dark colors just to hide the fact that this is really, really terrible. I think it's somewhere on the list of bad shadow projects, if there is such a thing. I think this is definitely one of the roughest I've ever done. You can see here how much mishmash there is between her lower back and the actual belt, which sticks out. That's just a consequence of the model used in the game. So it's not strictly a bad trace. It's just one of those things that come across wrong when you do a shadow version of something. It's one of the things you have to be aware of when you do a shadow project. When you have a character, the silhouette of that character, the composition of that character is going to change when you lose all depth and you have just one or two colors to work with. And I knew that going in, but I couldn't find a good place for the belt to cut off without being very janky. So it ended up being this bulky thing that sticks out a little bit. And by pure happenstance, I'm going to be camouflaging that a little bit later on when I finally settle on whatever sort of distress I am going for here, because I did want some distress. Part of this is a bit of a proof of concept, I suppose, or a trial test to see if this idea I have in my head is actually viable with the script I'm going to be using. So I am going to be integrating this artwork into the text itself, or at least it's going to be, the text is going to be wrapped around this in a way, and I wanted to see how viable that would be with this particular script. And I'm going to hold off on what precisely that script is for just a moment. Just let me have my suspense a little bit more. What I'm doing here is, ta-da, it's time rotor. What I'm trying to do here is find a mix between readable text and visible texture in the background, because I don't want her to scale this wall and that wall to take up all the space. I want the wall to be there, or at least a representation of the wall to be there, but I don't want it to interfere too much in the text. They're supposed to be at least nominally separate. So, Time Rotor, fascinating script. Not really the best example of it in this case, because of the actual phrase I am writing here. It doesn't lend itself too well to Time Rotor. It's certainly not making the most out of the mechanics that Time Rotor offers. So in this case, it is a bit more bare bones, but at the same time, I suppose it's easy to read because you don't have to take into account any tense related abstractions that you need to apply after you translate the text. Time Rotor is very abstract, or at least it can be under the right circumstances when it's used the way the creator intended to. So for now, I am just writing the text, marking out some of the text that needs to be, shall we say, edited a little bit later, because certain letters need to go below the word lines in order to be interpreted correctly. There is some size to this, but in order to make the sizes unambiguous and make it very certain which letter is which, I need to do a bit of destructive editing on the various word lines in the same manner that the guide does, to make sure to convey the reader the fact that certain letters are above or below other letters. So it's a very simple set of mechanics here, but it is very, very useful when it comes to reading it. So this should be very easy to read. It should be very clear what's going on text-wise. It's just not the best example of the complex and interesting mechanics that Time Rotor can offer, because this is such a simple sentence, and this is such a simple sentence tense-wise. So enough about that. That was the text. Now I am trying to find that balance I talked about earlier. How do I put in this climbable surface without messing the whole thing up? This is where the the trial part of the proof of concept comes in. Because if this works out, it's going to allow me to do a few more things in this same vein, but bigger and better. Hopefully better. At least bigger at any point. So I am starting small here with a small text, seeing if this concept is viable at all before I do some more stuff. Because I don't want to do big, complex, actual complex time Rotor Gallifreyan if this concept doesn't work out. Or otherwise, at least I'm going to have to rethink the framework I'm going to have for this, because I have a framework in mind, but if this doesn't pan out, I'm going to have to rethink the way I place things. So I'll see how the reception to this goes. I'm not. It's not my best work, and I know that. But at the same time, I feel like I succeeded in that goal. In the end, I have the text wrapped around the character and the background. It's not interfering in any noticeable way. I don't have anything that's hard to read. The symbols for Time Rotor is they are what's the word? They're straightforward. They're not. There's no complex details you can suddenly miss, and small bits and pieces that change things. They're pretty surface level characters. There's nothing too complex about them, so I'm not worried about them not being unreadable. And at the last moment here, I'm just cleaning up some of the excess around the text, some of the mesh gradient that went outside the circle, cleaning that up a little bit, using a simple square to cover up, and then I am pretty much done. So this was a little short proof of concept here, spending most of my time on the background instead of the actual text, because there's not a lot of text here. But if this is sensible, I'm going to do more of this in the future. I think there's some potential here for Time Rotor to get a bit of spotlight here, and I think that's good. So, having said that, I will see you another time. Have a good day. Bye.